This is Trey. There's some language in this episode that some listeners might find offensive. So I am here in Drums, Pennsylvania, outside of a polling place. I'm standing here in a top coat and a sport coat, and that is just about enough to stay warm. I'm going to go up and try to talk to a few people to see maybe how they voted, but also just to hear how they're feeling about America right now in 2022. Excuse me, ma'am. Would it be possible to talk to you about...
No, I'm the athletic director here.
It's not about the election. Okay. Sir, I'm doing it's not about the election. Oh, no. You don't I want to talk about America.
I'm on the clock.
You're on the clock? Okay. I'm Trey Kay, and I'm the host of a program called Us and Them.
Trey Kay.
Yes, sir. And we are out of West Virginia Public Broadcasting, and we're distributed by PRX, which is in Boston.
This guy's doing an interview from West Virginia.
I don't need it.
No, I'm filling in for you.
You do it. You're good at it.
Thank you.
Could I interview you?
If you're here when I come back, I'll talk to you. All right?
Okay. Would it be possible for me to talk to you for a podcast show that I'm working on?
I'm working the polls. I only came out here to catch the smoke.
To catch a smoke?
What do you want to talk about? How long is it going to take?
Not even that long. It's not even so much about the election. It's about America.
You don't mind if I smoke while we do it?
Not at all. Getting people to answer questions isn't easy, especially on election day. Hi there. I'm Trey Kay from West Virginia Public Broadcasting, and I'm doing...
I know English.
You don't know?
No English. Little English.
¿Habla en español?
Sí.
¿Cómo se dice? Es la proprietor de Kiki Bakery.
Sí, propietaria de Kiki Bakery. Sí.
Mi español es malo. You have to be polite, you have to be persistent, but once you show you're ready to really listen, it's worth it. Because then, in most cases, people open up and tell you what's on their minds. That's one of the things we're going to be doing in this hour. Listening. We're listening because it's been another one of those years in America.
There is no longer a federal constitutional right to an abortion.
50 years worth of women's rights in America overturned in an instant.
The United States Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, ending a woman's right to abortion and beginning a big new fight over reproductive health.
We are following the breaking news out of Texas, and it is heartbreaking.
Let me warn you that what we're about to show you is disturbing on so many levels.
The gunman walks across the parking lot and into the school at 11:33.
Mass murders in Texas, Colorado, New York, and so many other places brought calls for gun restrictions, but did not end our love affair with guns.
We're going to try to get compliance, but this is now effectively a riot.
49 hours declaring it a riot.
The House panel today focusing on what they say is former President Trump's unprecedented effort to weaponize the Department of Justice.
The January 6th House Select Committee opened an investigation into the attempted thwarting of democracy.
5 to 50 be advised, Capitol Police 1 advised they're trying to breach and get to the Capitol.
But it didn't seem to settle anything. Then came the midterm elections. Democrats did better than expected, holding on to the United States Senate by a razor's edge. The Republicans won control of the House by a slim margin. Then, Donald Trump returned to center stage, announcing his desire to become president again.
In order to make America great and glorious again, I am tonight announcing my candidacy for President of the United States.
This surprised no one. And it just might keep Americans yelling, threatening, ghosting, and unfriending each other for at least the next 2 years. As a nation, where do we go from here? To answer this question, we'll hear first from some voters in Pennsylvania. That was a highly coveted swing state in the midterm elections. Then we'll turn to a few experts, a history professor at Rutgers University, a law professor from the University of California, Davis, and finally, Henry Cisneros. He's a former Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, and he currently serves on the board of the Bipartisan Policy Center. It's a group looking for the best ideas from both political parties. The question we asked everyone was this: how is America doing? Then we asked, why do you say that? We began with voters who opened up to me at the polling places in Pennsylvania. I spent the day driving around the 8th Congressional District.
At the stop sign, turn right onto South Church Street, then turn right into the parking lot.
It's in the eastern part of the state and home to a hotly contested U.S. House race.
Let me take you out east here in Pennsylvania's 8th District. This is north of Allentown here. This is in this area where it's supposed to be Scranton Joe country, if you will.
Before the midterms, pundits could not make up their mind about who might win. It was that rare place in America, a swing district with Republicans and Democrats living and working together in pretty much equal numbers. But are they talking to each other? Are they listening to each other? It seemed like the perfect place to set an episode of Us and Them.
I'm Joe from Drums, PA.
How is America doing now?
Terrible. Just go to the back gas pumps or go to the grocery stores and you tell me, what do you think how it's doing? I mean, your price of food just about doubled. I mean, we're just a horrible situation. Look at heating oil. Heating oil is like up to almost $6 a gallon. I mean, so how are people going to survive? I mean, you just, it's terrible. What the Democrats did in this country is absolutely horrible. And they don't have a leg to stand on. I mean, again, what do they have to give back at me to say that they're doing a good job there?
But I guess...
Let me ask you, can I ask you something?
Sure.
What did the Democrats do good in this last year?
I think that a Democrat would say, hey, we passed the Inflation Reduction Act. That had that...
What did that do? I mean, what did you so you passed that act, but how come my gas is still $4.25 a gallon?
But I'm actually not here to kind of argue about policies.
Yeah,
I'm more here to talk about, like, are people in your world, in this area, is there talk, is there communication?
Yeah, sure there is. But there's not a whole lot of feedback on it because everybody's on the same page, basically. They all know, with the price of fuel, the price of gas, the price of groceries, everybody's on the same page.
Would you agree with me that America seems to be divided?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely is.
What do you think is dividing America?
I think the Democratic Party, like about 4 or 5 years ago, divided it. Back with Obama, they divided this area.
This area or the
Everywhere.
country?
Everywhere. They divided the whole country. From the NFL to everything else. They were kneeling. They won't stand for the flag. And you tell me that's not divided? Who divided that? They divided it. That's where we're at.
A few minutes later, at the same polling place, I met another voter.
Yeah, my name's Jeff Benner, and I live up here in Luzerne County in Drums.
I began by asking Jeff the same question I asked Joe. How is America doing?
America's doing pretty well, actually. They're compared to where we were, having to dig out of another Republican administration economic disaster. The W administration ended in financial disaster. Deadbeat Donald's administration ended in financial disaster. And we've had to dig our way out of it again. And we're trying to get our way back up in the world, actually being respected instead of laughed at.
So, in many ways, I'm just finding this kind of interesting. I just spoke to two people who seem to be more on the conservative side of the political spectrum, and it seems like you may be on the other side of that.
Yeah, I don't watch the fixed news channel, so I actually know what's going on.
What are the most pressing issues for you as you went in to vote today?
Well, I'm in Pennsylvania voting for Senate. I wanted to vote for somebody from Pennsylvania. That was the most important thing.
That's a reference to Republican candidate Mehmet Oz, who's originally from New Jersey.
Second to that is the Roe versus Wade, and having the Supreme Court stolen the way it was is an embarrassment to the country.
Do you engage with people who have a different worldview from you?
I have them on my production floor.
And what's that like?
It depends on the person. It depends on how touchy they are. It depends whether they're willing to actually talk about and engage on the topics, or if they're just going to parrot the stuff that they've heard on right-wing television and have no idea what they're talking about. So they're the people who actually have like a point. Yeah, sure.
But do you have the talks?
Do I have the talks? Sure. Yeah. I talk with people all the time. Mm-hmm.
Do you find it more tense now, or same as it always was?
It's certainly a lot more tense because just the rhetoric has been ramped up. I mean, you see the language used by Deadbeat Donald with the way he talks about people. It's just embarrassing, and he just eggs it on because he's got an ego the size of the planet, and he can't just feel good about himself unless he's putting somebody else down. And unfortunately, that's kind of trickled through since the rest of the Republican Party has shown to be completely spineless and just rolled over to him.
Can I assume with what you said, you didn't vote for President Trump in the last election?
No, I would never vote for that. I can't say any. No, I would never vote for a complete imbecile and jackass like that.
What do you think it is that divides Americans?
For the large part, it is media, because that's how they get their clicks, they get their views. Psychology has shown that. You see that with people that get addicted to Facebook and things of that nature, that and they don't even really hide it. They come flat out and say, we have an algorithm. We're trying to get you on here more, and the way you do that is you annoy people. Again, if there was a non-evil Facebook out there where they just let you go and see things in chronological order, that would be fine. But they've even taken that option away. You can't even do that on Facebook anymore.
When Jeff Benner began talking about Facebook and social media algorithms, it reminded me of a conversation I had recently with David Greenberg. Greenberg is a history professor at Rutgers University. Before that, he was a reporter and editor. He understands journalism and its place in American democracy. In 2016, just before America elected Donald Trump as its leader, Greenberg published a book titled Republic of Spin, an inside history of the American presidency. As a reporter, he's written for The New Republic, Politico, The New York Times, and many other outlets. Greenberg says we've lost our way in a really big way.
Everybody these days is getting their news from social media, partisan media, internet sources. There's some great internet publications, but if you look even at some of the better ones, like Slate, which I used to write for, 99% of it is just hot takes on stuff that's reported elsewhere. It's sort of parasitical. It's not breaking news. It's not reporting. It is takes. And so much of what is circulating in people's social media feeds on the web is just people kind of arguing about, a fairly small base of reported news.
Now, just think about that for a moment. Before the internet, newspapers presented reported news stories. Now, people read takes. Takes are people's opinions about the news. Takes are not newly reported facts. In fact, hot takes are now a thing. A hot take is just a strong opinion, kind of like throwing out an opinion at a bar just to see how your friends might react.
And if we were to go back to a model where newspapers are kind of our primary diet, and all this kind of web stuff, can still be in the mix, but is secondary, I think there would be more of a grounding in, a shared set of facts.
We're here in the waning days of 2022.
Where are we right now with regard to where our nation's getting their information, and how do you see this playing out?
Well, I think one of the main problems is just a lot fewer Americans sit down and read the newspaper. Look, I think the New York Times and the Washington Post and the Wall Street Journal still do a very good job. Associated Press, Reuters, these news services, they still aspire for the most part to give us uninflected news coverage. To some degree, during the Trump years, I think the Times, maybe the Post to a lesser degree, lost its way and began, adopting this mentality that I think is really dangerous, that desperate times call for desperate measures. So we have to be out there, in our headlines calling this person a white supremacist, or, saying this is a lie, even if you don't know that it's a lie, even if it's just false. Like, it's not enough, it's fine to say something's false. That's what objective journalism does. But to attribute motive when you don't know the motive, is tricky. I think there are a lot of people at the major newspapers now who kind of see themselves as part of the resistance, as it came to be called under Trump. That's dangerous. Your job is, at a newspaper, to help tell the truth, not to advocate for one side or the other. And you have to trust that the public, if given the news, can make up its own judgment.
That has consequences.
So I think some of the decline in trust and credibility of our mainstream media has to do with those media's own abdication of a posture of objectivity. Now, if you talk to the people who lead those papers, they'll say, no, we never abdicated, and they have had sort of fights internally to keep their news outlets on the straight and narrow path, and I think they're probably, more successful than not in doing so. But I do think, one sees a lot more improper editorializing in the newspapers than one used to.
Defenders of a punchier, more opinionated press argue that when the President of the United States lies as consistently as Donald Trump did, journalists don't have a choice. Those same people would argue that it was even more necessary when Trump urged a mob to attack the United States Capitol on January 6th, 2021. Again, Greenberg disagrees.
Well, look, we should bear in mind that Trump didn't win, that he lost the 2020 election, and, despite all his efforts, left office. That may seem like, okay, that's sort of a low bar to clear, that the election victor actually did assume office and we had this riot on the way. That may not sound like good news. But I guess what I'm saying is the system is still working. It's under pressure. There are threats. There are problems we're seeing. There's certainly a problem in the Republican Party where, as you say, people like Liz Cheney get mowed over or, voted out of office. So that is cause for concern. But we haven't yet seen the system collapsing. And in some ways, this may be an overly hopeful gloss on it. So I acknowledge that.
Greenberg says in the aftermath of the very partisan election of 2020, it was striking to see a number of Republican leaders at the state level who pushed back against Trump's efforts to win the election.
He wanted the state legislators in Michigan to, give Michigan to him. They said no. He wanted the Georgia Secretary of State to find votes for him. They said no. Various lawsuits were brought. Trump's own judges, or I should say judges he appointed or nominated, ruled against him. There is something about having the responsibility of power that if you have, even a glimmer of love of democracy and respect for the rules and for the system that will act as something of a counteract to just going with pure partisan power. And that happened in 2020. So people who, according to our worst fears, would have abetted Trump said no to him.
I just want to remind you, the name of my program is Us and Them. And I think that we live in a time where we are really experiencing that type of divide. And I know that you as a historian certainly know that that's been a dynamic that has ebbed and flowed throughout the history of this nation and, for that matter, throughout the history of the world. But do you see some time when you think that we might come back from a protracted period of polarization?
I don't see us getting through this period anytime soon. I think, we're clearly in the thick of something. I do think we will eventually emerge to a different political culture, and very possibly one with less polarization and less hate and less denial of basic factual truths. I think that's possible to get to. I mean, one thing history does teach you is things never just continue in the straight line. I had a professor who said, the easiest thing to do when you predict is to predict that it's just going to kind of continue the way it's been going, only more so. And that kind of prediction is usually wrong. There are always unforeseen changes, twists and turns, disruptions. And the challenge is we really don't know what they're going to be. I had thought, to confess, because I was wrong, that at first I thought it was that COVID would bring us together the way a war or an external threat has in the past sometimes helped to overcome partisan division at home. And of course, it didn't do that. Maybe it made things worse. I had thought that the Capitol riot, that in the aftermath, we would see, as you put it before, the fever breaking. That didn't happen. Or it happened for about a day, and then it reverted to partisanship. So I'm not expecting some external event to come along and just overnight change this dynamic that we seem to be locked into. However, I do think events in the world happen and impinge on us in ways that we don't expect or foresee and scramble our lines of attachment and loyalty and change our political outlook. And, after a time, we settle into a new kind of set of political terms.
After a break, we'll hear from a law professor who grew up listening to Loretta Lynn. That professor says a big part of what divides us is where we live and how we view the world.
There's so much negativity, as if the algorithms have decided that because I'm a law professor who lives in California, who, whatever it is all the algorithms know about me, they assume that I want to see people talking about how idiotic rural people are. And I don't want to see that. I don't believe that, right?
And we'll hear from a former White House cabinet official who says the sense of good and evil that are sometimes evident in our political extremes can't hide the more moderate middle.
It does make for a harder collision, that's for sure. But again, neither one of those views is the majority. And there's something like a broad middle, or something like a common sense middle that does exist.
I'm Trey Kay, and you're listening to Us and Them. This program is supported in part by the West Virginia Humanities Council, the Greater Kanawha Valley Foundation, and the CRC Foundation.
Music lifts us up and brings us together, even when we can't get together in person. Mountain Stage brings you live performances on the air, online, and in our podcast. They remind you how it feels to be in a live audience listening to live music. This is Larry Gross, host of Mountain Stage. Find a link to our stations and our podcast online at mountainstage.org.
Hey, Trey here, and you're listening to Us and Them from PRX and West Virginia Public Broadcasting.
So, can you tell me who you are and what do you do?
My name is Lisa Pruitt, and I teach law at the University of California at Davis.
And where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Newton County, Arkansas, which is a county of 8,000 people in rural northwest Arkansas in the Ozark Mountains.
So if there was a soundtrack to your childhood, what would that be?
Oh my gosh, it's funny because the first artist that comes to mind is Loretta Lynn. And the second artist that comes to mind is Merle Haggard.
Why those? Why those guys?
Loretta Lynn, a couple songs, I think, really reflect things that were going on in my household and in my world when I was growing up.
You thought that I'd be waiting up when you came home last night. You'd been out with all the boys and you ended up...
My father had a very notorious drinking problem, and my mother was a teetotaler. And so don't come home a-drinking with lovin' on your mind. I think even when I was young, I understood that this was this was ringing eerily true.
Yeah.
Now, I loves me some Loretta, but I didn't want to talk to Lisa just because we have similar tastes in music. At UC Davis, she works at the Center for Policy and Inequality Research, with a specialty in rural issues. So she has a lot to say about America's urban-rural divide.
In what academics call the national imaginary, right? Red states are conflated with rurality, are conflated with whiteness, are conflated with conservatism. And blue states are conflated with urban, coastal, well-educated, elites. These are the terms that we use. And it's really too bad because we all know that the world is more complicated than that.
That's true. I spent a lot of time in the so-called red state of West Virginia and the so-called blue state of New York. Yet I know conservatives and liberals in both places.
In my world and in my media echo chamber, I guess because this is what the algorithms think I want to hear, there's so much rural bashing, right? There's so much negativity as if the algorithms have decided that because I'm a law professor who lives in California, who, whatever it is all the algorithms know about me, they assume that I want to see people talking about how idiotic rural people are. And I don't want to see that. I don't believe that, right?
So what are urban people, why are they angry with rural people in rural states?
Well, they're angry because most recently, they're just angry because of Trump. Like you, I was surprised that Trump won. And if you and I were surprised, given our backgrounds, you can imagine how surprised, the stereotypical coastal elite was, right? It's like, what the heck just happened? And because a lot of the analysis was that red voters did this to us, red states did this, the Electoral College did this to us, so rural voters become the enemy, and they become... And then, because they're the enemy, we can say all sorts of nasty things about them. They're all insular and racist and, misogynist and, on and on and on.
This seemed like an important point, and perhaps spoke to the reasons why Americans are so divided. So I asked Pruitt this question.
Are white rural Trump voters racist?
Some of them are, I suppose, but it depends on your definition of racism, too. Right? So again, we have to define our terms.
Define our terms, right.
And I think that we're running around, I think the left is running around calling people racist by a very capacious definition that the people being called racist have had no input into defining. When I was growing up, a white supremacist was somebody who was in the KKK, definitely one of the bad guys, right? This was about somebody who would choose to be part of an organization that openly embraced white superiority. Now, we use white supremacy as almost a synonym for structural racism. We use it much more broadly. And again, for people who've not been in settings where they can understand why that linguistic shift has happened, this doesn't make any sense at all, right? Because they're being called white supremacist, and they know that they're not members of the KKK or, the Proud Boys or any other group that you might label, with that historical notion of what we mean by white supremacy. So we've got people, in law, one of the first things we teach students, maybe your dad taught you this since he's a lawyer, you got to define your terms. We don't have shared definitions of a lot of really, really important and potentially incendiary terms.
Not long after talking to Lisa Pruitt, I traveled to Pennsylvania for the midterms. The conversation that I had with the law professor was echoed by another Lisa I met on Election Day.
So my name is Lisa Longo. I'm a political consultant. I've been working in politics for about 10 years now.
This Lisa lived in a very blue place, Chester County in suburban Philadelphia. But she was working as a campaign manager for a Democrat in a very red place.
Yeah, so Yesenia Rodriguez is running for the Pennsylvania State House here in the 116th District, which includes Hazleton, West Hazleton, Hazel Township, and then a swath
It
of
includes a lot of places. I asked Longo if she was having success reaching across the political divide.
Are there family members or friends that you're in contact with who have a worldview that is very different than yours? And if you do, are you in conversation with them?
Yeah, I'm actually working out here because I think for far too long, Democrats have not paid attention to rural areas. And so working families have lost the message that the Democratic Party supports working families. So that's why I am working out here and not in my very blue Chester County area. As for family members and friends, I have some family members who don't even want to talk to me anymore because they've become very, very Republican and gone very far to the right. And I've maintained the Democratic values that were my grandfather and all his brothers. They were all very strongly Democratic. And when I was growing up, And I'll just say this, recently we were at a funeral for a family member, and I suggested to one of my cousins that we could all have a drink, and he just laughed and said, I don't think you'd want to hang out with us, because he knows what I do for a living and he knows I work for Democrats. So that was really sad.
And you say that within your family and with friends, there is a political divide.
Oh, there definitely is. I don't think there's anyone living in America who isn't seeing some divide with some family and friends. It's just where we are as a country. It's sad. And I actually liken it to people are turning politics into just another sporting event where all that matters is who wins. And they forget that politics is about policy. Politics is about making the world a better place. Politics is about the American dream. So I'm voting for the people who still will uphold that American dream, who want to help working families, who want to help children have a better future, go to college if they want to, or join a trade if they want to, or open a business if they want to. And to me, it couldn't be more clear.
What if that person was a Republican?
If there was a Republican who was going to uphold all those things, I would absolutely vote for her.
What is it that divides America?
Oh, I think right now it's disinformation. And again, I think it's this competitiveness that has turned politics into just another sporting event. They're rooting for their team like it's a football game. And people are like, I'm going to only vote for Republicans. And, Democrats are terrible. It's like, it's not about a party. It's supposed to be about the people. It's supposed to be about who is going to do the best job. And I think that's really the problem in America is we're turning it into a sporting event, and it's not.
On Election Day, Longo's candidate lost. Despite our differences, some Americans have more in common than many partisans believe. One of those people is Henry Cisneros. He served in President Bill Clinton's cabinet as the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. Before that, the San Antonio native was a city council member and mayor of that Texas city. Today, he's mostly an optimist.
In my darker moments, I share the sense of pessimism and anger and contention. We see moments like the election of 2022 where people's good sense seems to emerge. And I'm not saying that because the Democrats did better than expected, but because people just kind of rose and a set of balanced judgments came to the fore. And you can analyze it from the perspective of Roe or from the perspective of Trump or from the perspective of other hot button questions. But I've always believed that if you give people enough information and you take the time to explain and re-explain, the people collectively will do what is essentially the right thing. That's my profound and unshakable judgment. And even though they make mistakes sometimes, like the election of 2016, a mistake in my view, when they have a chance to correct it in 2020, they did. So I just have an abiding faith, and I don't mean this as some romantic notion, but a practical faith in the collective judgment. And for the most part, the American people end up doing the right thing.
I'm thinking at the time when you were mayor and the time that you were on the city council, we really didn't have an internet, and we didn't really have like a kind of a tidal wave. I'm thinking maybe like a tsunami of misinformation. So even though we have that, do you still feel hopeful?
I do. And it's because I used the word collective every time I said it, because there is, I think, a gestalt, an underlying collective wisdom. And it's a mixture of culture and experience and good sense and religious beliefs and everything else. And it may be impacted by misinformation campaigns, and it may be impacted at another level by some crazy internet strategy, but those don't touch everybody. And the collective body prevails.
These days, Cisneros serves on the board of the Bipartisan Policy Center. It's a think tank dedicated to looking for, quote, the best ideas from both parties. Shortly after being tapped by Clinton to serve as HUD Secretary, Cisneros experienced a friendly, bipartisan gesture when his predecessor, Republican United States Senator Jack Kemp, spoke out in support of him.
When I went to the Senate for my confirmation hearing, one of the people who insisted on testifying on my behalf was Jack Kemp, my predecessor of the other party.
And for another party.
Yeah. So later, we got together urged by other people to write a kind of a bipartisan approach to housing policy in the United States. We did it.
That happened in 2005. Cisneros and Kemp's book, Opportunity and Progress, a bipartisan platform for national housing policy, was published by Harvard University Press and won a Common Ground Award. Common ground. That's something that I think is lacking from American discourse. I asked Cisneros about that.
It seems today, and it seemed probably since at least 2016, that kind of bipartisan spirit really, to me, it just doesn't seem, it seems dead to me.
I don't think it's dead. I think it is wounded.
Okay.
I don't think it's even near death. It's just beneath the surface. It's dormant, if you will, waiting to be appealed to and called forth. And there's an awful lot of people in the Congress, both parties, who don't like operating the way the Congress is operating and would, at the first opportunity, approach things in a bipartisan way.
Why don't we see profiles encouraged to?
Well, you did. You've seen Congresswoman Cheney, who should be in a modern book of profiles of courage, and others like Congressman Clyburn.
He's talking about James Clyburn of South Carolina, one of the top Democrats in the House of Representatives,
who has to bring in disparate wings of the party as a civil rights icon to speak to how we're going to make progress together. So there are people out there who deserve the title. Now, it is true that some things have changed structurally, like the redistricting that makes seats more extreme, and people in the primaries emerge who are from the extremes, not from the center, because of the concentration of population in their districts, and has made only a handful of districts truly competitive in a bipartisan kind of a way.
But when something really, really needs to happen, the parties tend to come together, he says.
In a genuine national crisis, a national emergency, and there are some emergency issues on the table, you will get a bipartisan result from the Congress. On Ukraine, today, you would get a bipartisan result. On matters related to saving Social Security and those that you will get a bipartisan action. On the budget, the debt level, you'll finally end up with a bipartisan. People will try to save their skins and hide and not be for it, but if they have to be, they're not going to shut down the government. So, and damage the country's credit rating. So my definite sense is you'll see bipartisan action.
That doesn't mean the rhetoric isn't nasty. There's name-calling, questioning an opponent's motives, and plenty of personal attacks. But Cisneros says that's always been a part of American politics.
Even in the Revolutionary War period and the period of formation of the Republic itself, if you look at some of the contentiousness and attacks as between Jefferson and Adams or others, the things they wrote about each other, the calumny and corruption they alleged, the battles that Alexander Hamilton fought, not that much different than Marjorie Greene or AOC or others and what they might say about each other.
We definitely feel that the rhetoric and the incivility seems heightened.
It's not.
You don't think it is?
I don't think it is. I mean, you seriously look at the discussion in the Revolutionary War period or pre-Civil War. It rose to the level that states seceded and the country went to war for 4 years.
Well, I've been saying for about a decade now that it seems as though our incivility seems to be ratcheting up.
I think it's noisy. I think it's loud. American politics, it's rough. You know, it's interesting. When I was a city council member, I went in with a sort of series of good faith goals for the city. And I took some shots, political shots, defeats on things that I cared about. And I was really stung because I wasn't prepared for it. It felt to me that the last time I had felt that sense of pain and embarrassment was as a kid on the playground who got into a fight and was beaten. And that same sense emotionally, psychologically, was what I felt like in politics. And then I concluded two things. First, the very nature of politics is conflict. It is taking people with different ideas and trying to put them in the same place to hammer out something that resembles a solution. So conflict. And the second is sometimes people play very hard and it does hurt. They will destroy your career. They will destroy your reputation. They will destroy your family. They will seek to destroy your capacity to earn income. It's rough. But American politics has always been rough.
When I went out this election day, on election day for the midterms of 2022, what I heard from both sides wasn't just that that the people, the Democrats speaking about Republicans and Republicans speaking about Democrats. It wasn't just that they're wrongheaded. It wasn't just that they're silly morons. It was that they were evil.
Okay. No, that's true. And I think that may be a new element. Well, it's not a new element, but it's maybe a heightened element. Many evangelicals believe that people who disagree with them are morally wrong, morally taking this country to damnation. That allows you very little latitude for other people's opinions if you believe they are godless and taking the country on the road to perdition. Democrats, on the other hand, believe that people are racist, intolerant, and that a new era is dawning, and there isn't room for people who believe that way, or even people who look like those who believe that. So it does make for a harder collision, that's for sure. But again, neither one of those views is the majority. And there's something like a broad middle, there's something like a common sense middle that does exist.
Cisneros says the recent midterm election showed America is, quote, a country that's wrestling with a lot of unresolved dilemmas, including abortion.
It's an element of public life that things don't stay the same. Things change. The Greek philosopher Heraclitus said,
right,
you can never step in the same river twice. Meaning, this morning's water is downstream now. This is a new river. And one of the things that's changed on abortion is more and more people have understood, look, you can't give people rights and live that way for 50 years, then take the right away. And even people who are opposed to abortion for good reasons, Catholic, for example, will say there's an element of human nature that says we're going to need to have some kind of tool like that, whether it's rape and incest or other realities. Sexual mores have changed. Unless you can change those, we're going to have some common sense position. So now we're talking about what's the date of viability. That's where the conversation is. So you understand my point. My point is what we're fighting over itself changes. And when you offer people bans in state legislatures and they overrule them by popular vote, it tells you things have changed. The legislatures thought they were doing what the people wanted. The people have voted that that's not what they want.
While Cisneros believes Republicans went too far on abortion, he says Democrats who advocated for defunding the police also went too far.
There was concern about police violence, legitimate concern. And there was concern about the riots that occurred after the George Floyd case, legitimate concerns. But defunding the police violated common sense. Not even the poorest people in the most in the neighborhoods that we stereotypically think are most opposed to the police wanted to defund the police, wanted fewer police to protect them. So we have these issues all around that we treat as if they're massive dividers of the country, but they're at the edges.
As I was wrapping up this interview and thanking Secretary Cisneros for his time, he jumped in with one last thought, and it was a good one.
Let me just say one other thing. One of the reasons I'm optimistic is because I grew up as a Hispanic American in a poor neighborhood, and I've seen so much positive change in my life. And I think you'll find with a lot of people of color that they bring a faith in the American future that I dare say is stronger than the faith in the American future that many other Americans have, who are more tired or more disillusioned, seemingly disillusioned, or disaffected. So America makes a mistake if it doesn't tap that source of ambition and source of faith in the country. This is not a foreign faith. This is a faith in the American system as we know it. They're willing to work today, pay taxes, study for jobs, raise their children. And we make the mistake of not being able to see that because of the color of their skin or their complicated last name or accent or the music they like or the food they eat. Then we're missing something, because that's the salvation.
You've been listening to Us and Them. Our team for this episode was me, Trey Kay, Todd Melby, Matthew Hancock, and Kate Smith. Thanks to Professor Sam Friedman at the Columbia Journalism School. And special thanks to all the voters that I spoke with in Lucerne County, Pennsylvania on Election Day. I really appreciate your hospitality and candor. Michael Lipton, Tristan Lozow, and Ahmad Solomon wrote and performed the Us and Them show music. Mark Lerner designed our logo. The marvelous people at PRX and West Virginia Public Broadcasting make Us and Them possible. So do grants from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the West Virginia Humanities Council, the Greater Kanawha Valley Foundation, and the CRC Foundation. We'd love to hear your thoughts about this episode. Would you share them with us on our Facebook page, or could you brave Twitter and tweet to us at Us Them Podcast? Us and Them was originally developed with assistance from the Mentorship Program at AIR, the Association of Independents in Radio. Happy New Year, everyone, and we'll see you next time on Us and Them.
Support for this podcast comes from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.